us deep into Lent, give us a sense of how it is you call us to keep the calm and keep our souls as we head toward your crucifixion, to your resurrection. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. So for whatever reason, this week was the week that things in my life sort of came to a head. And I was feeling kind of frazzled. And I thought back, you know, how that happens when you take an inventory and you sort of say, now what's going on that I'm not paying attention to? And so, you know, I was remembering that a couple of weeks ago I had a college roommate die, and I was unable because of some other obligations to get to her funeral, and there's a little bit left over there that I need to spend some time on. And then I was thinking, well, you know, we just had a great vestry retreat, and some of us went away to a conference before that, and there's been a lot going on, and we're beginning to get ready for this capital campaign that we're going to do, you know, and so I thought, well, maybe that's what's going on. And then I thought, oh, Tracy, like, this is like the 4th week in Lent. And then I remembered, you know, that this is the way it always is. That one of the things that we do in Lent is that we take seriously examining our lives. And so, in a sense, we crack ourselves open and we look at what's there. And it often, at least in my case, you know, that which I see inside, I always also see out in the world. And I can be sort of sad. I remember a spiritual director saying to me one time when I was about this deep into Lent, and I said, you know, I'm just kind of sad and I'm not sure why. Like, there's nothing specific that I ought to be sad about. And he said, well, it's Lent. So I want to speak to you today a little bit about that in relation to the story that we just heard. The chaos in the world seems to me to be increasing. At least that was my sense this week. And it's not just with ISIS in the Middle East, or worse than ISIS, the stories of Boko Haram coming out of Nigeria, or the refugee crisis in Europe and all the things that all of these things spawn. But you know, I was deeply sad for humanity this week because just yesterday I read on the front page of the New York Times the story of what's happening in the South Sudan. And I have to say, I had this dear parishioner in the last parish I served in Washington, D.C., and he had worked in the State Department for years to bring peace to the Sudan. Now, just to give you a hint, Sudan was sort of one country for a long time, but there was a Muslim north and a Christian south, and there was a lot of atrocity going on there. And so one of the things they were politically trying to do is find a solution, and so to separate the north from the south, and all would be well. So the good idea came to fruition 5 years ago, and so 5 years ago they split. The article that I read yesterday talked about the civil war there now and how it has raged in the South for almost as long as they've had independence. Violent atrocities and starvation, including 50,000 deaths from ethnic cleansing. The landscape has been marred and the people have been devastated, and so many people are displaced and live in camps. And so, you know, for all the good work of this dear friend of mine, I know his heart is breaking. And my heart was breaking a little too. It seems like chaos was reigning again. So I wonder, why do we humans fight so and create so much chaos? A New Yorker cartoon has two armies facing each other across a battlefield. And on one side are folks lined up, and some are mounted on steeds, and others are on, you know, holding sort of almost javelins, and others holding banners on one side and on both sides. And on one side of the battlefield, the banners have the head of a rabbit. And on the other side, the banners have the head of a duck. Now, mind you, these don't look like wonderful heraldry from England, so it's meant to be funny. But I don't know how funny it is when I think of this. So because the commander of the Duck Brigade is all revved up and holding his fist in the air and shouting back at his troops, and he's saying, There can be no peace until they renounce their rabbit god and accept our duck god. I mean, we're just silly, aren't we? We're just silly. You know, I was getting ready to watch my favorite men's college basketball team. If you don't know which one is my favorite, I'll tell you later. They were about to play their debut game in the SEC tournament on Friday evening, and it's the beginning of my March Madness. But right at the beginning, they were doing introductions, and so I actually switched the channel on my TV from those introductions just to kind of check in and say what's going on in the world, to watch the evening news. And what I saw were angry crowds, looking much like the ones I had seen on TV here in Baltimore last spring, protesting violently the killing of Freddie Gray. Only this time, the crowds were in Chicago, outside an arena where a Trump rally had just been canceled. So my notion of March Madness and watching my basketball team is that I don't take calls from parishioners. I don't do anything else. I just take my brain and I put it in a jar over on the side. And all of a sudden, having clicked to the news, I got this blast from my unconscious highlighting my subliminal fears that the world is going crazy or falling apart. I tell you those stories because I think that's what it must have felt like. That's the way Jesus and his friends felt at that dinner that I just read, that I described when I read the gospel this morning. Now, he had been traveling around Galilee for 3 years, teaching and preaching. He had made 2 pilgrimages to Jerusalem and was on his way there for a 3rd time. He was just outside of Jerusalem. Bethany is like a half-day's walk from Jerusalem. From the beginning of his ministry, there had been resistance to his message, from the religious establishment especially. So much of what he had said and so many of his actions just seemed so contrary to codified religious practice, and so threatened the veneer of calm and control in Palestine. Now remember, Palestine was this outpost in the Roman Empire where the Jewish authorities and the state had been making deals for years to keep the peace. Well, the raising of Lazarus that had happened just before this story, the raising of Lazarus had been the final straw. Jesus, with all his healing and his miracles, had raised the expectations of the crowds, and everybody was anxious and afraid. So that anxiety was a backdrop to this dinner that Jesus was having among friends. And we know that shortly after this dinner, there would be jubilation at Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and a few days later that would be followed by masses shouting out to Pilate, "Crucify him, crucify him," all leading to the cross. It took a perfect storm of forces to get to the cross, and a perfect calm to get to the resurrection. So I want to talk to you about the calm in the story today. In a sense, Mary, with her perfume of pure nard, was the quintessential force of calm in the midst of the chaos all around her. She was the one who was not anxious or afraid, the one who kept her eye on the great mystery of love and devotion that God had for God's people, that Jesus had for his disciples, and that his disciples had for him. She was the one who, in the midst of everybody else's fear, gave extravagantly in love, not counting the cost. On my first trip to Haiti many years ago, I visited a women's sewing cooperative in the middle of the worst slum in our hemisphere. To give you an idea, this co-op met in a small tin house that was literally situated on, almost you could say, land, but not really, because it had been created from a garbage dump. And just outside the door to this co-op, I mean a couple of feet away, was a stagnant stream, supposed to be some kind of water supply, that contained all kinds of plastic and even human feces. The smell was so overwhelming that, it took all that my two companions and I could do not to gag in the presence of the people who had invited us there to be with them. Besides some mechanical and pedal-operated sewing machines, there was a table made of plywood across two horses that served as a sewing table and a few chairs in the room. Greeting us as guests, our Haitian hosts gave us the only 3 chairs in the room, and quickly one woman darted out of the room and returned a short time later with 3 cold Cokes in glass bottles, the tall kind. Remember those? Not the small ones, the tall ones. Chagrined and startled even by their generosity, we gingerly accepted their Cokes and then quickly tried to share the contents of these large bottles of Cokes with them, and they said no and would have nothing to do with that. They were unusually pleased to host us and share with us clearly more than they could afford. We knew these women lived on less than $200 a year, if that, and that the cost of a Coke might even be 0.5% of their yearly wage. And we also knew that it probably literally meant that one of those women in that room would not eat that night because she had given her money to give us refreshment. Their lives looked like chaos to us, but what they were offering to us was extravagant. Generous. The word generous would be too small a word to describe their large hearts and their free manner in giving away more than they had. Now, I don't know if we can control chaos. In fact, I'm suspicious we can't. War or destruction, poverty or death. We just aren't in control, are we? But chaos is out there. It was there at the beginning of creation in the first 3 lines in Genesis. God hovered over the deep and brought order out of chaos. I think it was there from the beginning of time, right alongside the goodness of creation. Many would even say that it is in chaos that God is to be found. When we want to find God, we might need to be willing to be in the middle of chaos. When we're looking for God and it's chaotic, our need seems most urgent. And so deep in Lent, this is a chance for us to consider God in the chaos and to find the calm together. Now, I'm going to pass out to you this oil. Today, I'm going to ask each of you to be Mary. Remember the stories of Martha and Mary? Martha is busy running around doing things and thinking she's important, and Mary is the one who sits at Jesus' feet. That's in the Gospel of Luke. In this Gospel of John, Mary is the sister that when Jesus comes for dinner, Martha's making the food, but Mary comes, and what does she do? She greets him and takes oil, precious, 200 denarii worth of oil. Probably a year's wages worth of oil, and wipes his feet to clean them, and then wipes it with her hair. A very intimate act, an act incredibly intimate for a Jewish woman who's not ever supposed to be touching a man out in public at all. So I don't know if any of you have had a week like me where the anxiety of the world's circumstances is affecting you, or if the combative political climate is getting under your skin. Or if you are carrying something inside or have a broken part of you that is just crying out for healing, something that upsets your balance and creates chaos, but I think we can offer calm to each other. Let me tell you a true story. I heard this from a friend. He was sitting in a passenger jet, and they were going through a severe storm. And as all the passengers were being tossed and bounced all over in the turbulence, a young woman turned to him and said with a nervous laugh, "So, Reverend, you're a man of God. Can't you do anything?" To which he responded, "Lady, I'm in sales, not in management." In this case, I think we're all in management when it comes to an atmosphere of chaos and uncertainty. And we have the calm of God with us that can quiet souls. So I'm going to give you this perfumed oil with pure nard. What scholars say was the same nard, same oil that 2,000 years ago Mary placed on Jesus' feet at that dinner party in Bethany. I think all of us in the church are called to be the calm in the center of chaos, and that because of that, we are actually deep into Lent and in chaos. We are the keepers of the hope of the resurrection. We are the ones who stand fast while the chaos goes through whatever it is and claims that there is a better day and that there is peace. So, using this oil, I invite you to offer calm and a pathway to resurrection for each other. So I'm going to pass out these jars, and it's going to be awkward. It's totally okay. It was really awkward when Mary started pouring oil and using her hair on Jesus' feet. It was so awkward. But you're going to offer this oil to each other. And you may have to have an exchange. You may need to look in each other's eyes. You may say where you'd be comfortable having it, on your forehead or on your hands or wherever. So we're going to offer that to each other. I want you to share this oil and feel its extravagance, to give it freely, to receive it joyfully, and let the anxiety and the chaos just fade. If you need to be thinking of something, remember the resurrection and share that peace that only God can give.